Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Luis Ordoñez Wash Process Mexico from Ilse Coffee. And there's the bag right there. And Ilse, based out of Stamford, Connecticut. And this coffee was featured in our most recent blind taste test rankings video, where it finished 5th place out of 6 coffees on that day. This is our 3rd ever full bag review of one of Ilse's coffees, having previously reviewed a Costa Rican and an Ethiopian coffee. And the biggest takeaway I had from those reviews was that Ilse's coffees are really flavorful, and it left enough of a positive impression that I very much wanted to go back and try some more of their coffees. And given that I really enjoy reviewing Mexican coffees, it made for a perfect fit, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing this one, as this right here is day 24. And recipe we went with for this coffee was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this one, feel like the safest bet is light medium American, as that's kind of the way it worked towards the end. So we'll go with that. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 8, first impression, and it was that blind taste test day, and this cup was very much marked by its clarity as well as prominent nuttiness. Right off the bat, one of the easier cups of coffee to tell, given that it had so many Central American characteristics, most distinctly the very strong nuttiness that we were experiencing from the cup. A slight bit more depth to it, as well as there's a slight bit of this darker fruit. It's not overly sweet, but exceptionally well defined given that strong nuttiness. So it left an okay first impression. We were going to see how it continued from that point going forward. Day 9, a little better of a second attempt, as it remains really structured with the nuttiness, but a little bit more sweet. Also a bit of the vintage Central American characteristics, as it was a fair bit of this robust chocolatiness to it. And the dark berry, yet again, a little better. At this point, it was kind of reminding me a lot of a nutty brownie. And that was a, I would say, positive impression, especially given what it was. We continue on as day 11, there was a possible brewing error, and I always note anytime there's possible brewing errors. I think there were issues with the water on this day, as there was a bit of the nuttiness, but also a strong off-putting earthiness, herbality that was quite prominent in the cup. It was a throwaway day, still attribute that to being some water issues. We continue. Day 13, significantly better day, as this is when I realized that, yeah, it was just a brewing error and I had to reset the water I was working with. Back to a much more traditional Mexican cup with the sweeter nuttiness, slight chocolate, moderate bits of darker fruit, and that kind of classic honey-like attribute that I've experienced from so many of Ilse's coffees, which was the biggest takeaways I had. In addition to the flavorfulness from the previous reviews, they came out very honey-like, and that was another example of that here in this cup. Day 15 lowered the temperatures, and it toned down a bit of the ashiness in the cup. So I've kind of neglected to say that in the earlier days, but it did come out a little ashy, and I don't necessarily attribute that to the roast profile. I just kind of think it was what this coffee was, a Mexican coffee with a little bit of an interesting variety used. So I think that's why I was able to get this ashiness, but lowering the temperatures really toned that down, as it had previously been borderline overbearing. Definitely a more traditional cup in a lot of attributes, most distinctly the chocolatiness, the nuttiness that was coming from it. But even then, it was still complex and unique enough that I was seeing positive enough results. Day 17, cup continues skewing a little bit more towards the traditional side of things, as this is very strong on the nuttiness. And given that Ilse's coffees are very flavorful, this one was very flavorful in that nutty sense. Not particularly sweet, slightly vegetal with a little bit of herbality still. Not much has changed within the last few cups, other than the fact that I was able to tone down a little bit more of this kind of smoky ashiness from it. Day 19, best day of the coffee to this point, as the vegetal aspects that I'd experienced once upon a time are significantly toned down. It's a slight bit sweeter, still a bit of the nuttiness, more toned down, balanced, and a slight bit more of the fruit sweetness. Very slight, darker berry fruit sweetness, but still present in this cup. Day 21, ran it through the automatic coffee maker, and it slowed down so much of the momentum I was experiencing. It was much more in line with the earlier days, as the automatic coffee maker really brought out a lot more of the robust chocolatiness, the more heavy attributes of this coffee, including a little bit of that smokiness, a little bit of the ashiness. I think those lower temperatures at the V60 really kind of cleaned this coffee up and really allowed it to focus on the nuttiness that I was experiencing, as well as a little bit more of that kind of honeyed and berried sweetness in this cup. So not necessarily my favorite on day 21, but I'd experienced enough positive days that I was willing to throw that one as another toss-away day. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and to level 4, so let's go through those real quick. The acidity level 4, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that on this day. It feels a little bit more toned down. For what it's worth, here on day 24, this is by far the best I've experienced of this coffee. I think maybe a little bit of patience would do this coffee well, as the acidity feels a little bit more toned down, and it's the sweetest it's ever been by a little bit of a distance. So don't necessarily agree with that here, but it was in moderation from time to time, so I could see it there. Saltiness level 4. As mentioned, the nuttiness by far the most pronounced characteristic. I think that they list cashew butter. I could see that. I could also see peanuts. I mean, it's just very much in that mixed nut line of flavor profile. Berry fruit level 3. I've been saying that it was a little bit more slight, maybe a little generous on that level 3 mark, but again, experiencing it more in today's cup. So I could see it at a level 3, especially now. Seems fair. Chocolate level 3, and it's actually become a sweeter chocolate, so that's a nice little positive step forward for this coffee. Smokiness, bitterness, savoriness, I can definitely tone those down. I'm going to tone all of those down to a level 2. This cup of coffee is significantly better than it had been on those previous days. I'm telling you, the combination of those two things, lowering the temperature and giving it time, really helps this coffee. Body level 3, yes. Cleanliness level 3. I could probably be a little generous and bump that one up. Again, this coffee is just so much better today than it had been in the past. But for the most part, what I was experiencing, those things are correct. It does have a pretty even finish to the cup, so I feel like a level 3 is very fair on that as well. Sweetness level 3, again, I think I already discussed that, but yeah, it fits there. There isn't too much else, honestly, in this tasting wheel. I feel like for what I was experiencing for the duration of this coffee, this is pretty accurate. It's just really improved within these last couple of days, so I've noted the biggest differences we've experienced. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I was having a little bit of a difficult time working through it in the earlier days. It wasn't necessarily my favorite. There were a couple of brew errors. Higher temperatures didn't seem to be doing it good. There was a lot of stuff I didn't like in it, smokiness, ashiness. And once I really got this cup right, I felt like it was a pretty solid representation of Mexican coffee in general. Traditional in one sense, with a very bold flavor profile that Ilse is very good at demonstrating from their coffees. So for that reason, I would say significant improvement. Still not necessarily my favorite, but they did a good job for Mexico, and that's what I have to say on that. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you really like the flavorful nuttiness, this one seems like a wonderful fit for you. Also skew a little bit more towards the traditional coffee sense because this had so much of the chocolatey components with a lot less of the sweeter berries, sweeter florals. Those weren't in huge abundance with the exception of that slight honey and very slight berry, neither of which overly pronounced, especially not to the sense that the more traditional characteristics were experienced in this cup of coffee. I think for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Luis Ordoñez Wash Process Mexico from Ilse Coffee. Thank you for watching.